Welcome. I'm Connie Delaney, Dean of the School of Nursing, and what an honor it is to be here to celebrate the launching of this Volume 31, Issue 3 of Amplifying the Voices of Our Indigenous Persons and Lives. I'm honored to celebrate this powerful celebration again of Indigenous voices and leadership. Thank you, Marty, and thank you to Creative Nursing for, from the beginning, establishing a pathway of, I'm going to say, not being shy, but raising the voice of essential and sometimes hard to talk about issues and experiences. We absolutely celebrate your work, and we especially celebrate you as an alum of the school. Today, we're honoring the co-editor and the institutional partnership the School of Nursing has with Creative Nursing, and your co-editor responsibility, Misty. You're fun, and Teddy, yes. And you're both phenomenal leaders. And again, your voices help amplify the voices of so many. I particularly want to highlight your shared commitment in raising the voice and the lived experiences of Indigenous persons. And if I might say, holding us accountable for recognizing the heart, the respect, and mainly changing our law in terms of moving forward and honoring all. So this issue matters. I'm thinking even of today, and tuned into the news as of an hour or two ago. We are inundated with less than respectful experiences and actions related to persons, humanity, our environment, all of life. And this particular issue couldn't be more timely in recognizing that honor and respect of all people, sovereignty, empowerment, truth-telling. I also want to make a comment about the commitment to equity and belonging. As our School of Nursing, we are committed to more than the words. Thank you for all of you that are part of this. And make the talk walk. And I particularly lift you up, Teddy and Misty, in doing that. We are about an unwavering dedication to the preparation of Indigenous people, Native American. So the Pathways Project, as you know, our initiative, is sound, unwavering, and it will sustain. Over the bumps and over flying high in the clouds. It will sustain. We are dedicated to this doctoral program. That's a pathway for American Indian and Alaskan Natives. So with that, I want to close with thanking you. Thank you for asking me to join this celebration. Thank you all for celebrating this publication. And we know it is more than a publication. It is advancing, I'm going to use your words, Teddy, a movement. And the movement is about action on, again, equity, reconciliation, and flourishing. I join, and we all join in advancing this issue. For that, I'm going to say beyond the end, because it's forever a pathway to. Thank you and congratulations. And congratulations to you, Marty, for your outstanding leadership.
Well, hello, everyone. Yes. And I thank you, Dean Delaney. I need to make one correction. I am technically not an alumnus of the University of Minnesota School of Nursing, but my mother and my daughter are. So there you go. So we're just so grateful for your hospitality and hosting this event. I think this is either the third or the fourth time that the University of Minnesota School of Nursing has hosted one of our virtual launch events. I want to acknowledge all the work that Teddy Potter and Mr. Wilkie have done, more about them in a minute, and also the superlative tech coordination and support of Steve Rudolph. Blessings on your head, Steve, for all that you do to make these things happen. So I'm joining you from, this is here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I usually participate in these events from my apartment, which is about a 20-minute walk from here. And from my apartment, I can see the Mississippi River is right down below me. So I live on the same land that this university is built on, which is the traditional and legal homeland of the Dakota people. And right outside my window of my apartment is a place that is particularly sacred to the Dakota people. It's called Owami, which means swirling waters or waterfall. And there is restoration going on in that part of the river right now. I want to give my personal commitment to honoring and supporting the ongoing legal and traditional homeland of the Dakota people. And also our journal is committed to presenting voices of Indigenous experience, including wisdom and knowledge of healthcare that has been marginalized or silenced altogether in the past. That's partly what this issue of the journal is about, but this is going to continue. I'm so happy to see some of these faces are people that I only know through email. So So on behalf of the editorial board of Creative Nursing, a journal of values, issues, experience, and collaboration. That's the full title of our journal. I welcome you to this celebration of the publication of this issue of the journal. We have a growing community of scholars. They are thought leaders who are willing to write about things, as Connie said, and talk about challenging issues. Some of this is discourse that a lot of journals avoid, but we welcome it. We don't seek out conflict, but we welcome it when it comes our way. These are things that need to be talked about. And it's so exciting for me to see the authors in this issue who have published with us in the past, including Misty Wilkie, Sandy Richardson, Anna Richardson, Aisha Munis, and Shahzad Inayat. And if I missed anybody else, we love all of you. So in this publication year, Creative Nursing 2025, our overarching theme is amplifying seldom heard voices and dismantling oppressive structures. We haven't done a ton of dismantling so far this year, but we've done a ton of amplifying. And we continue to confront these complex issues. In issue 1, the value of case studies, we highlighted this undervalued methodology for amplifying voices that are seldom heard, and emphasizing the uniqueness of each person as the main character in their own story. Issue 2, which was published in May, is called Mental Health in the 21st Century, reported on the effects that we are feeling. It seems that technology is outpacing our ability as a species to adapt to this new technology. And we had 12 articles from all over the world that show that this effect is being felt all over the world. All these articles illustrated in some way the concepts of mental health as a continuum. It's not that you're either mentally healthy or you're not, it's a continuum. And our functioning in the world as the measure of our mental health. This issue 3, is called Indigenous Voices, Sharing Our Stories and Leading Change. And it continues our legacy of publishing information that the world needs to hear. So our 2 guest co-editors are from the University of Minnesota School of Nursing. Dr. Misty Wilkie is a clinical professor, director of the Doctoral Education Pathway for American Indian and Alaska Native Nurses, director of the Center for Indigenous People, Health and Nursing, and holder of the Catherine R. and C. Walton Lillehei Chair in Nursing Leadership. Dr. Teddy Potter is a clinical professor, director of the Center for Planetary Health and Environmental Justice, and a member of the directorate of the Catherine Densford International Center for Nursing Leadership. Misty and Teddy have brought together a group of scholars, many of whom are Indigenous, and they report on the impact of the physical and cultural genocide against Indigenous people in many lands. But when establishing the rightful place of Indigenous scholars and ways of knowing and teaching about Indigenous health, it's important to acknowledge the pre-contact history of Indigenous people and to take a strengths-based approach. That message informed the title of my editorial. The title of my editorial in this issue is called Stories of Strength. All of this issue's articles about Indigenous health are exemplars of strengths-based, solution-focused knowledge while remaining fully aware of the issues of structure and power. The themes of these articles include Indigenous foundations of thought, supporting Indigenous nursing students, providing culturally safe care, the impact of climate change, the power of language to shape nurses' identity, and narrative inquiry as a methodology that focuses on storytelling. And then a quick foretaste of the piece to come. Issue 4, which comes out in November, is called Shaping a New Narrative for Disability Inclusion in Nursing. So we have such riches about Indigenous health to discuss today. After all the articles have been presented, we'll have a moderated open discussion with an opportunity for questions and comments for individual authors and thoughts about the theme of this issue. I'm also just going to advise you, you can reach out to the authors personally, and we encourage you to do that. I'll be posting the emails of all the corresponding authors in the chat in a few minutes. And please do reach out to them to further these discussions. And also, when you read the articles, those addresses are found there too. The digital version of this whole issue can be found on our journal's website. And there's also an annotated table of contents that briefly describes each article. Those things are posted on our website along with the recording of this meeting when it's ready for prime time. It'll be posted on our website too. And we'll post those links in the chat as well. And one more thing, if your library doesn't already have a subscription to Creative Nursing, there is a link right on the right-hand navigation bar of our website that says recommend to library. I'm just saying. So I'd now like to hand the mic to Misty Wilkie, guest co-editor, to present her article, Decolonizing Health and Restoring Balance, Indigenous-Led Efforts to Improve Health Outcomes Among American Indian and Alaska Native Populations through Doctoral Nursing Education.
Thank you, Marty. One thing you'll notice or maybe notice is we're all eating, so it's a true Indigenous event. That folks are eating in the background, and I have my food here too for when I'm done with my stuff. So thank you all for joining us today. What an honor and what a privilege it's been to work with Teddy and Marty on getting this issue out. I know for me personally, and it's just been something really to celebrate. So we all know what American Indian and Alaska Natives have faced with generations of broken treaties and historical traumas and ongoing policies that deeply affect our health, even more so today. These realities continue to shape disparities, but I believe they don't have to define us. We need to change the narrative and focus on positivity. So one of the most promising strategies to improve health outcomes is to increase the number of Indigenous nurses, especially those earning bachelor's, doctoral, and advanced practice degrees. Research indicates that when the nursing workforce mirrors the communities it serves, trust is established, culturally relevant care is delivered, and health disparities are reduced. Tribal nations are sovereign governments, each with their own language, culture, and traditions, and because of their shared lived experiences, Indigenous nurses understand the impact of loss of land, boarding school policies, and systemic inequities. They bring that understanding into patient cares in ways that can't be taught in a textbook, helping Indigenous patients feel seen, respected, valued, and heard, and safe. So undergraduate programs like Naganawini-Mananig at Bemidji State, which is Naganawini-Mananig is Ojibwe-Moan for We Take Care of Them. These types of programs have shown the power of combining academic preparation in a Western setting along with cultural grounding of Indigenous values. Since 2017, Naganawini-Mananig has graduated dozens of Indigenous nurses, 43 to be exact, as of May 2025. And that has been done through weaving together cultural, academic, social, and financial supports. So building on that success, the University of Minnesota School of Nursing launched the doctoral pathway to for American Indian Alaska Native nurses in 2022. And this initiative provides scholarships, mentorship, culturally safe spaces, and community connections to support students pursuing DNP and PhD degrees. The results we've had in 3 years are historic. We have supported the largest cohort of American Indian Alaska Native doctoral students in the nation. And I'm very proud that several of them are here with us today as part of our programming, getting together, sharing food and socializing, and today learning. Students have described the pathway as a Native academic family, one that makes them feel like they belong while also preparing them to be leaders, policymakers, researchers, and advanced clinicians. Certainly, challenges remain, especially in fully indigenizing the curriculum and addressing racism and cultural unsafety within institutions, as well as financial hardships. But the progress that we've made is undeniable. And more Indigenous nurses are stepping into advanced roles, ready to transform healthcare and restore balance in our tribal and urban Indian communities. So at the core of this work is a teaching from our traditions, and that is to be a good relative. Supporting Indigenous nurses with cultural, financial, academic, and social resources isn't just about individual success. It's about lifting entire tribal nations. So while the nursing workforce reflects our people, or when the nursing workforce reflects our people, everyone benefits. As the late Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone said, we all do better when we all do better. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Morgan Torres Headland to present on his article, Asserting Indigenous Academic Sovereignty Through Assemblage, Indigenization, and Cultural Safety.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will be a little bit brief. My wife works for Oregon State University and had to travel on short notice, leaving me to manage things at home. So I have a kid right behind me who's got to get into guitar practice here in about 11 minutes. I may have to go and then turn off my camera for a minute and then get him into guitar practice, and then I'll rejoin. I wrote this article in collaboration with a scholar from University of Hawaii and another from Aotearoa. My co-authors and I met at Healing Our Spirit Worldwide about 18 months ago. Stayed in touch, and when I saw the opportunity to participate in writing for this special issue, they were the folks who came to mind immediately, because we share a background in academia and then we share a background as nurses. And Donna Polakiko and I have spent the last couple of years talking extensively about identity in terms of our Western professional identity and our accomplishments within that framework, and then also our identity as Hawaiians, and trying to interpret and understand and take responsibility for the roles that we play in both of those spaces, and the way that we have used our successes in colonial academia and colonial healthcare systems to be of greater service to the communities that I'm confident we both want to be of the most value to. It's a topic that I hear a lot of Indigenous and Native academics speak to this sense of being in two places, sometimes feeling, just having very complex feelings about existing and largely being successful within frameworks that we recognize historically were meant to marginalize us and exclude us. And the processes by which we hold and find space, and then why do we stay there? Ebony Komene, our co-author from Aotearoa, is a PhD student now and is going through those steps. And in conversation with her, I believe both Donna and I saw, oh, here's somebody that's definitely on the path. Just, we remember being at that place on the path. And so it came together for us to write this as a team. Assemblage is a philosophical idea that I saw from Deleuze and Guattari's many years ago. Their notion of rhizomes and rhizomatic knowledge, rhizomatic understanding, rhizomatic epistemologies, and it fit into my attempts to better communicate Indigenous epistemologies and the way that Indigenous knowledge is created and then shared and handed down. That's why we used assemblage as our methodology. It helps me frame systems thinking in a way that isn't using machines as the analogy. Deleuze and Guattari present assemblage in a very different way. And then the notion of cultural safety coming from Aotearoa, I think, is where we're at in sort of a progression from cultural awareness, cultural responsiveness. The terminology in nursing kind of keeps evolving, and cultural safety, I think, is of particular value to us in nursing because it emphasizes that it has to be the most vulnerable person within the system who determines whether or not cultural safety is actually happening and whether or not it's actually being achieved. That really resonates for me both as a nurse and as faculty in a university. I bring up all the time that if there isn't a student in the room telling us that we're doing well, I'm not particularly interested in the conversation. The echo chamber of faculty touting our successes makes me deeply suspicious if there aren't students telling us that we're being successful. So the idea in cultural safety that it's the patient who determines whether or not we've achieved our goal, that really resonated. And so assemblage is a way of thinking about the structure and the systems and the components of the system, cultural safety and being the goal. Those two things together, I think, is our process of decolonializing or indigenizing, which I'll be really honest, in my own practice, though I appreciate work has been put into defining those terms and I value the people who are doing that work, I don't always know whether or not the product of my effort is decolonializing or indigenizing. And I don't seek to be the one who defines that. I really seek for the people in the space to let me know which one I've achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan, to you and your team for your wonderful liberation of us from the strictures of traditional academia and research. The fact that you're daring to move into this space gives all of us permission to think differently. And so I'm grateful for you and your work. It's my pleasure to introduce Kristen Paestawa Picasso, and I hope I pronounce that roughly closely. Kristen and her colleagues are presenting on Healing Through Representation, an integrative review of American Indian and Alaska Native students in health professions education. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you for that introduction. Yate. Hello, everyone. My name again is Kristen Payestua Picasso. I am both Dene and Hopi and a doctoral student from ASU's Edson College of Nursing and Health Innovation. It's a true honor to be here and to present on behalf of my co-authors that include Dr. Timian M. Godfrey from U of A, Dr. Tim Joseph Zokowicz from UNM, Dr. Sarah M. Link-White from UNM, and Dr. Barrett Michaelek from ASU. Together, our work represents more than academic inquiry. It's more of a commitment to advancing equity, accountability, and cultural grounding in health professions education. So, why does this matter? Well, less than 1% of physicians and 0.3% of registered nurses in the United States identify as American Indian or Alaska Native. This representation is not accidental. It stems from systemic inequities, colonial policies, and institutional neglect that continue to marginalize our Indigenous students. Increasing representation in health professions is essential towards reducing health disparities and also ensuring culturally congruent care among our tribal communities. And from our integrated review of 14 studies, we identified 4 reoccurring barriers. One is academic preparedness, where students often come from underfunded schools and face standardized testing that don't reflect Indigenous ways of knowing. Secondly, cultural isolation and racism, a lack of Indigenous mentors, tokenization, and microaggressions create these hostile environments. Third is financial hardship. The high cost of education forces many to withdraw early. And fourth is institutional policies where Western-centric curricula and rigid expectations ignore cultural obligations and Indigenous knowledge systems. However, in our review, we found 3 programs and strategies that work. And one is culturally responsive mentorship, where Indigenous representation of mentors and peer networks help reduce isolation and increase confidence in our students. Secondly is financial support. Existing programs like recruitment and retention of Alaska Native students in nursing and caring for our own program improve retention and graduation rates. Third is cultural integration. What this looks like is incorporating Indigenous knowledge into curricula and providing clinical placements within Indigenous communities to strengthen student identity and their commitment as health professionals. So our findings, in all, our findings show that representation in itself is healing. And supporting Indigenous students isn't just about diversity. It's about reimagining educational spaces that honor Indigenous knowledge, relational accountability, and community healing. Institutions must commit to long-term structural change, and that comes through policy reform, increasing our tribal partnerships, and having accountability and equity in health scholarship. So overall, in closing, I'd really like to affirm that what we found most significant is what we see as Indigenous resilience from our students and communities. And from there, we find that that continues to lead our way forward into these actionable changes. Like someone mentioned, you have to walk the talk. And programs rooted in Indigenous worldviews prove that when we are supported and when we feel belonged, we thrive. So that sort of rounds about all of our findings and what's next as far as our research. Thank you again for this opportunity to share our findings and be a brick in a bridge of creating research that's equitable for all. So in all, Akaha, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You're now part of the great tradition of creating new knowledge that others can use and others can cite. So thank you for your work that starts the process of making sure that we include more and more voices. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Dr. Best, it's just such a thrill to welcome you. I know Odette because we've been working together, and I want to salute her. She comes to us from Australia, and you can say more about you and your team, but I wanted to speak a moment about you and your excellent presentation at the International Council of Nursing in Helsinki in Finland. It was important information to include. It was a large session with over 300 people attending, talking about how we nurse for planetary health, which the International Council of Nursing has adopted as a core principle for all nurses around the world. And Dr. Best did a lovely job helping us understand the roots of planetary health, which are indigenous. It's not a new concept. It's an ancient concept that is being rediscovered and re-understood. So welcome, and I'm glad our paths are crossing again.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Teddy. It's just after 8 o'clock in the morning here in Australia. So I'm still drinking my morning cup of coffee to wake up. But before I begin and talk about our paper, I would like to acknowledge the lands that we are all gathered on and pay my respect to your elders and your old people, past and present, and also your emerging leaders that are coming through. I also bring greetings from the country that I am on. It's the land of the Yagara and Yugarapul peoples in Queensland, and I bring greetings from my own Mukan, my grandmother, my old tongue we call her. She's 106. So I would also like to thank you for the opportunity to be able to present this morning. I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors on this paper, which are two Native American nurses. Firstly, Dr. Melissa Kelly, who I believe is here today on the line somewhere. And Melissa is at University of Texas. And the other author I would like to acknowledge and speak about is Dr. Melissa Vera. And Melissa is at Washington State University, and I believe she's on a plane at the moment on her way to Aotearoa. So without those, yes, without those two amazing Indigenous women scholars and in climate scholars, it would have been quite difficult to put this paper together. So the impetus of this paper actually started way back in 2019, and it was literally only not that long before the world decided to close down due to the COVID pandemic. And here in Australia, we held an Indigenous Nurse-Led Research Summit at the university that I was at, University of Southern Queensland. And just prior to that conference happening in early December, Australia as a continent became enveloped through fairly significant bushfires that absolutely swept across three out of our 6 states. It was devastating, and we lost many, many lives, and it was estimated that we lost about 2 billion animals. So when a lot of our participants flew into Sydney, as one does, because they would like to see Sydney, and it's a major city here in Australia. It is the Aura country. And a number of them suffered from breathing difficulties when they arrived in Sydney because Eora was absolutely blanketed in smoke. And there was alarms and warnings, health warnings going out every hour about the amount of air pollution or sky pollution that was occurring. So when those participants got up to Brisbane at USQ, there was a number of them that talked about how bad the air quality was here in Australia and how it actually triggered breathing difficulties for a number of the participants at the conference. So for myself personally, I was in fairly constant contact with my own family who live in a remote community in central Queensland, and it's the community called Woorabinda, which translates to a kangaroo sitting down. And it's a very small, remote Indigenous community. Only about 600 people live there, but it's the community where generationally above me, my family had been removed to through colonial processes. So speaking to my family fairly constantly about how they were going, how the bushfires were, how was everyone's health, has everyone got access? And that community had to get water and food supplies dropped in to it from the army due to it actually being cut off due to the fires. In one of those conversations I was having with my cousin, he was quite distressed about the health impacts. And about a week after the conference had finished, globally, we had this picture just get beamed around the world. And the photo that got beamed around the world was actually of a dead joey, a small kangaroo or a baby kangaroo that had been trying to escape the wildfires and was actually caught in barbed wire fence and it was burnt to death. And it somehow seemed to represent the national emblem of Australia that this young kangaroo had been killed. And I rang my cousin AJ and we were talking about family and how was everyone and, that type of thing and how was everybody's health and how are the breathing difficulties going. And of course, the conversation naturally fell onto that picture because that's what we called it here, that picture. So that picture, when it got beamed around the world, started to get very heavily reported on globally, but also in Australia. And it came to represent a national emblem of climate impact. And so it was an interesting point of conversation for me and my family members. And my cousin actually said to me, Cuz, one of the things I have been grappling with in my head or trying to understand is that non-Indigenous people see that as the burning of a national emblem, a young kangaroo caught in barbed wire and dead. What we as Indigenous people saw, we saw the death of ancestors and totems. And for me at that stage, there was a penny drop moment around worldviews and Indigenous worldviews on how climate actually impacts upon us, our non-human relations, and of course, our land. So that was kind of like basically the impetus for this. And I had done some work with both of the Melissas around many, many discussions and research opportunities around that climate impact on Indigenous people. So that was the impetus for this paper. It really does provide for the audience Indigenous worldviews on climate. And so we wove three very distinct worldviews into this article. What we also did too was that we utilised an Indigenous methodology or an Indigenous method of research that came about here from an Indigenous academic in Australia, Dr. Lester Rigney. And when Dr. Lester Rigney was really talking about Indigenous methodology way back in the 90s, he developed these three principles that were very pertinent to Australian Indigenous people when we do our research and what that means for us. And our worldviews and our Indigenous standpoints actually become the bedrock of our research that we undertake. And really importantly for us as authors of this paper, it was to use an Indigenous methodology with the three principles about resistance as the emancipatory imperative Indigenous research. And that's what this paper was about. It was about the resistance for us around how climate sometimes gets positioned. Secondly, some of that stuff that principle that Lester Rigney brings to his work is that it's about political integrity in Indigenous research. And how we bring in our political integrity into this paper and into all of our research is through our relationality and our foregrounding that we do. So in this paper that we provided, we actually talk about who we are, how we are linked to country and to people and to nation and to language. And lastly, Rigney really talks about in Indigenous research that we must privilege Indigenous voices. And so for us as Indigenous nurses working in the climate space, what we did was we actually raised up some of the voices of Indigenous nurses through publication that have been speaking into climate research for a really long time. We have got one Indigenous academic here who has recently retired, and she started publishing about a link to land being damaged through climate impact way back in the 90s, but it's not very well known. So it was these three principles that really became the underpinning focus for us to do this research. So what we also got to do when we talked about our specific worldviews, I actually spoke about cultural burning as an Indigenous practice, about caring for country. And I got to talk about how when we talk about country in an Indigenous Australian perspective, we have what we call three countries. So we have land country, we have water country, and we have sky country. And so, as Indigenous nurses, when we are looking after our communities, our Indigenous communities, these three elements of country are always in our scope of practice as what we actually work within, what we actually understand, how we actually provide our care. Is that our link to our sky country, our water country, and our land country is integral to our health. I think I'll leave it there for the moment. Um, I really encourage people to, read the article. And if you do have any questions, please reach out and ask for further information or publications that we utilise, or just wanting to understand that, there is multiple ways that we can actually look at climate impact and climate change, and our responsibility as nurses, and all nurses need to participate in. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, Misty, and also Teddy. It is a cracker of an edition, and I must admit I'm incredibly proud to have been a part of it. So thank you.
That's Dr. Best. What a nice thing to say. I would like to turn next to our guests who are here from New Zealand, and you can say your other name for your country. This is Sandra Richardson, whom I got to meet this spring. She even crashed with me for a couple nights. Yay. And Anna Richardson, I think no relation, right? Yeah, right. So they're both named Richardson. And they are talking about a very specific thing that was mentioned by Morgan, which is cultural safety, and including the concept that it's the patient, in this case, who decides whether cultural safety is taking place or not.
Fantastic. So we're unmuted.
Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. First of all, kia ora. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So welcome. Welcome to you all. We would like to, first of all, acknowledge the role of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, or the Treaty of Waitangi in New Zealand, which introduces the notion of Māori as tangata whenua, which is, we have one native peoples in New Zealand, which are the Māori. And in relation to tangata whenua, which is our native people, we have tangata tiriti, which are the people of the treaty. So Anna and myself are tangata tiriti, which means to say we are not Indigenous populations of New Zealand. We are people who have signed the treaty, and we have a responsibility in that we try to uphold the treaty and its principles. Our research question that we brought was to look at the extent to which New Zealand or Aotearoa nurses incorporate cultural safety and te tiriti. And when we talk about the methodology of our study, you'll see how that actually fits. And we focused within nursing practice in ICU, And again, when Anna talks to the next slide, which is around our methodology, you'll understand why it was focused in this particular way. So I'm going to turn over to Anna to do that. But before we do that, I would just like to share a whakatauki with you, which is a Māori proverb. Hei aha te mea nui o te ao. Hei tangata, hei tangata, hei tangata. What is the most important thing in the world? It is people. It is people. It is people. And we share whakatauki quite a lot within New Zealand in terms of our presentations, in terms of our research, in terms of sharing knowledge. And those whakatauki are incredibly powerful. And this is a very well-known one. And it is one that I think is incredibly powerful. And just acknowledging that it is the people that hold the power and the people who are most important. So Anna, we could check to the next. Yep, thank you.
So kia ora koutou, it's great to be here. So far, all that you're saying has been resonating with Sandy and I so much. So the methods that we used, this was a global study that we launched in 2019 around family engagement in ICU. So Sandra and I conducted secondary analysis of our Aotearoa, extracting qualitative and descriptive data from the multi-site study. So 8 individual in-depth interviews were conducted with RNs working in ICU in Aotearoa, and we used an inductive thematic analysis with the framework of cultural safety and te tiriti, which we will illuminate as we proceed in the presentation.
Next slide.
Just with our audience today, I don't think we really need to say this, but we know that we have a long history of power over and oppression with colonising countries and our colonised Māori. So Māori are tangata whenua, people of the land, and they have experienced the pain of colonisation and health inequities, and colonisation isn't over, so the impact of colonisation goes on and on and on. So as we know, Māori have lower life expectancy, higher rates of chronic disease, lower screening rates, so accessing health services, culturally inappropriate care, which is significant and continues, and delays in definitive treatment. So next slide, please. So cultural safety is a regulatory practice expectation. All nurses in Aotearoa are legally obligated to apply the principles of te tiriti o Waitangi. So cultural safety emerged with the architect of Dr. Eri Hapati Ramsden, and 2 underlying concerns promoted the formation of cultural safety. Firstly, the physical safety of Māori people as tūroro, their patients and clients, and the need to ensure the cultural safety of Māori people. Just a reminder about cultural safety is, as we have stated earlier in earlier presentations, it's determined by that person or family, and it includes categories of difference. For example, gender, sexual orientation. And the nurse delivering the nursing service will have undertaken a process of reflection in his or her own cultural identity and will recognise the impact that this has on their personal culture and the impact it has on the people that they're caring for. So it's about our baggage that we may take to the bedside in this situation. So unsafe cultural practice comprises any action which diminishes, demeans, or disempowers the cultural identity and well-being of an individual. Next slide, please.
Obviously, we can't really address all the things that we tried to identify in the article, but we've pulled out some of the findings, the key points. We used an inductive analysis, so we had some ideas before we went into the thematic analysis, and we used the treaty framework, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and there's a number of themes that we pulled out around the principles or the framework. And these findings are presented here, and essentially they're around tino rangatiratanga or self-determination. And we were looking to find whether these were represented in the interviews that we carried out with the nurses. And we were very hopeful at the end of this project because we did find representation. And we found examples where the nurses were identifying the role of whānau or family, the notion of self-identification. And we've included some examples here, and one of which is respecting cultural safety, being culturally safe in your practice in an ICU environment. You don't get feedback from your patient until they're awake. You don't know if what you're doing is right, and you're just hoping to be guided. And this is that notion that for the ICU nurses, that many of their patients are unconscious, they're impaired, that maybe they don't recognise what's happening to them, and how on earth is the nurse going to respond to them in a way that is respectful when you can't actually ask the recipient of care, which is the basis of cultural safety. So how are we going to manage that? The second theme was pātuitanga or partnership, that notion of respect, of involving the patient, the family, using communication. The notion of whanaungatanga, of making connections, trust and belonging, manaakitanga, expressing kindness and respect and generosity. And again, an example there that the idea of thinking dignity, privacy, empathy, communication is paramount. The idea of being non-judgmental. So I think that there are several ideas that were coming through around respect, communication, and involving family. The idea of relational practice. And the next slide, please. And then mana tauriti, the idea of equity. And again, these are the principles from the treaty, and that they were being represented to some degree, at least, in the discussions that we had with the nurses. And I'm aware of time. So the notion of active protection, whakamarumarutia, physical protection, was definitely identified by the nurses, but also the idea of emotional and other forms of protection. And Kerry said, finding your voice and your strengths. We do encourage them to not be afraid to speak out or to speak up, and to help their patients and their families' voices to be heard. And finally, kōwharinga, options, and the notion of sharing knowledge and empowerment, of enabling people to be part of what is happening. And this, for us, is probably the key thing, that recognising for nurses, this is my normal, this is not your normal, so please ask me questions. Because key to cultural safety is that idea of recognising that we are often the exotic. It is not the patient who is exotic, it is us. We are different. That the patient's universe, their world, is different to ours. And that we can't learn that. We can't learn a tick box of you are whatever, you are Māori, you are Native American, you are something other. We don't know what you are. The only way we can find out is by asking questions. And then in the final slide, we just have a series of references, if we can just pop that up very briefly. And again, we don't know the answers. We can only ask the questions. And the patient and their family are the ones who can make the final judgment as to whether or not the care that we provide is safe. safe physically and safe culturally. And we'll leave it there and hope that that we can share some ideas with you at the end of the presentation. And I would just like to finish by saying our thoughts are with all the folks in Minnesota in regard to the horrific shooting that we've heard about here in New Zealand of the school. And I would just say, kia kaha, be strong. Thank you.
Not surprising, but surprising, how whether you're in the United States or Aotearoa or Australia, that our health disparities are the same among Indigenous people and our Indigenous values are the same. So thank you for sharing that. And also just to say, I'll be visiting Aotearoa in November. If anybody's going to the WIPSI conference, I'd love to connect. So next up we have Twyla Yellowhorse. I was able to meet Twyla a few times and yeah, she's just a delight. So looking forward to hearing about increasing tribal transfer student success in nursing.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Sometimes I have tech issues. I go between multiple docking stations, but Mitakiapi, Twaila Shuko Akanzi, Imakiapi, Ama Oglala Lakota, Wopila. Thank you for being here. I wasn't sure if can I share my presentation? Or did I have to send it?
No, you can share.
Okay, perfect. All right. I didn't know if I had the control, so let's see. Um, okay, got it. And can everyone see it?
Yes.
Yep.
Is it going? Okay. So I thank you for having me. I'm here to talk about increasing tribal college student success and nursing degree completion. I just It's going to be a lot of pictures, not a lot of words. So Dr. Laura Larson and Madeline Metcalf both co-authored this paper with me. Dr. Laura Larson's the director of the Caring for Our Own program and has years of experience in nursing as well as like really is a huge supporter and helping to work with tribal communities across Montana. She has also a mobile health training program that's fantastic. And Madeline Metcalf, she's a project coordinator in the Mark and Robin Jones College of Nursing here at Montana State University. And she's a current graduate student as well in the Indigenous Rural Health program at Montana State University. Just to share a little bit about me, I am a current doctoral candidate in the education program. I have been at Montana State University for almost 7 years. I didn't think this is where I'd end up, but I came back and a lot of my research focuses on what I'm seeing and experiencing working in my role as a program lead at the Caring for Our Own program. And I'm Oglala Lakota and uh, speaking on relationships, I do have a picture of my two boys there. And because like when talking about Indigenous methodologies, like I think one of the things that's resonated from me as a new like scholar, like researcher is like forming the relationships of as to like why I'm doing the things that I'm doing and also like my community accountability. So and then finally, like to acknowledge Miss Dr. Misty Wilkie, she's on my committee. So she's one of my on my committee, and as well as the folks in the picture, what that was actually taken in Aotearoa at the University of Waikato. We took so I got to be a faculty for a short-term study abroad. While we were there, with the multiple hats I wear, the doctoral students got to present their research there to the students. So it was such a phenomenal experience. And The whole thing was amazing. But back to the paper. So the Caring for Our Own program has been established since 1999. In my role, I've been here in the program for 3.5 years, but I think from a systems point of view, prior to coming to co-op, I worked in the financial aid office. So I just kind of am a systems thinker, and I hear all these stories from students about navigating a mainstream university, all the challenges, and what I really like about research is that we get the opportunity to situate our Indigenous students as knowledge keepers and share their experiences of what it's like to navigate these spaces. And I've learned a lot from them. Co-op, we require students to do weekly mentoring meetings with us just to check in. It's more like it's because we serve from pre-nursing to graduate students, it really is situational based on what the student's needs are. If we have a new student coming in, we're probably going to be meeting with them a little bit more and doing a lot of support to help build like peer-to-peer relationships and to make sure they're on track to applying to the nursing program. And then once they get into the nursing program, it's like they're so busy and that's where they're like submerged into the program. For this paper, it was a convergent mixed methods paper. So it really was important to me to one, like speak to maybe mainstream metrics of success as far as like if I'm talking to the university, they speak in different languages, and also to look into like indigenous ways of knowing and methodologies, so focusing on more of stories and qualitative measures for capturing what students are experiencing. Uh, so it was a really good experience for me because I don't leave my indigenous identity at the door. Like I'm seeing and experiencing and learning all at once. It's not like I'm putting an indigenous hat on one day and then a westernized hat on the other day. It's all happening in time in real life in real time. So it's been fascinating to like how do I combine these two points of views together? Analyzing our quantitative data, we saw that our students who are tribal college transfer students who hadn't completed any um, credits at Montana State University, was actually anything less than 17 credits, were at most risk of not completing the nursing program. So they'd get into the first semester. We didn't know what was contributing to that happening. I mean, I think anecdotally we knew like the challenges, but um, looking at that, we were like, well, we need to like do something to support students. So we started the Success Academy, and it was a it was like a onboarding orientation for our transfer students. We implemented this, and we served 30 participants, and they did the TEAS test. So our nursing program does not require the TEAS test. So like reassuring them that this is not going to um, penalize them in any way in their placement. Is really just to start like having students. It was a good way for us to gauge where students were at with student skills as far as like taking tests and getting connected to their like using their computers and their resources. And then during the 6-week program prior to their first semester in the nursing program, we did weekly webinars that covered like financial aid and navigating MyInfo, the online learning platform, and then as well as like giving the opportunity for them to meet their peers that are also starting at the same time so they can start creating peer-to-peer relationships. This is a picture of the tribal colleges located in Montana. Uh, a lot of our students, I think like 50% of our students come from Montana, either pre-nursing or a tribal college. Just huge representation, which I think I accidentally deleted that slide off. That would have been a nice slide to have on here. Um, and from those stories, though, the students really talked about uh, there's themes that emerged. So one was like just conversations within our talking circles about Success Academy. They really talked to the benefits of Success Academy was the refresher materials. So they got exposed to some like anatomy and physiology and caught up on like maybe what they had forgotten about in the time that they had applied to the nursing program. They highlighted relationships were highly important. Like a lot of them had created online chat groups to stay in contact, even though they are across the state at the 5 campuses. And then the others that they highlighted were like student successes, like just passing classes seemed like a huge challenge that first semester, and focusing on navigating school and how to balance that with their work and family life commitments. And then finally, like the challenges that they highlighted were like work commitments and navigating, just navigating MSU, but also talking to a lot of the discrimination and lack of Indigenous worldviews within the nursing curriculum. Um, and then also the final part was goals, is looking forward. A lot of them had already looked forward to the next semester and had already started making changes as like I found a different job so I don't have to work as much so that I can focus more on school or also just dreaming big about what's the next steps after they graduate. I really, I learned a lot in this process from them, and I think it's really important to highlight their voices and that we used all this data to help continue further, like to improve and tweak the future cohorts. We just finished our last one, uh, but I think it's really important to support them, and I really enjoy the work that I'm doing. Thank you.
Twyla, and I'm so glad you found nursing. We definitely need you. Next, I would like to introduce Michelle Scott Paul, who will be speaking about centering first voice in Indigenous ways of knowing in a health course.
Perfect. Thank you, Misty, and thanks all the wonderful presenters. We're really excited. I have both of my co-authors, Heather Bensler and Elder Evelyn Goodstriker, here with me today, all crammed, trying to all fit on my screen in my office. We have chairs. We're like laughing because we have bumper chairs going on. I'm going to try to share my screen, but y'all know what happens when you have like 3 screens and they show you the wrong things. So I'm just gonna, if you can just let me know if I'm showing you the right thing and not the speaker notes. Okay, what am I doing? I'm gonna share screen 3. Let's try this. Share. And where did it go? And now from beginning. Oh, go away with the record. Share from beginning. Can you, what's going on? There we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
And it says it's okay, perfect. All right. So we just have 2 slides, so it's kind of funny, but I said, should we share the slides? And Evelyn said yes. So everyone knows in this call that when an elder says yes, we do what our elders tell us. So we're going to share our screens. And so we're really excited. And, you know, so our article that we wrote together is really about the time that we've spent in relationship. We've talked a lot about being in relation. And first, I'll just pause and say where we are in relation. I really liked the framing around from our Australian relatives around the country and the different ways of viewing country, sky country, water country, land country, was that what it was? And just thinking about, you know, we often use the term other than human kin, and that it includes the cosmos, it includes the animals and the land. And so for us, we are located really close to Twyla. We were looking at that map and Canada was just above you. We're like, hey, we're just right there. Blackfeet, we're on Blackfoot territory. The home of the Six Gates of Tepe, or the Blackfoot Confederacy. And so really close by. And we're in Calgary or Mohkinstsis and Treaty 7 territory on what is now known as Canada. And we are at the University of Calgary. Heather and I work as professors in the University of Calgary, and Evelyn is hanging out here a lot. And we know, everyone knows when Evelyn is on campus because we have roars of laughter coming from my office, and everybody's really, really jealous. And so we have such a privilege to get to work here and play here. I'm Dr. Michelle Scott Paul. My family comes from the East Coast of Canada. Newfoundland, Mi'kmaq on my dad's side, and Irish and English on my mom's. And so I come by way of Takarono or Toronto, and I've been in Mohkinstsis or Calgary for 25 years. And so it's important when we talk about our relationships to land, and we talk a lot in the article about centering first voice. So what does it mean when we're really, because we talk about the 4 elements. We've created an Indigenous framework in nursing education for our new Bachelor of Science in Nursing curriculum. And this course, this foundational Indigenous health course, we've spent a year and a half at least working closely together to create from the course learner outcomes to the description that goes in the calendar to creating our own course learner outcome on spiritual versus just the what do they call it? Cognitive and the affective and psychomotor. We said, what about spiritual? And so we're really just from all of these sort of nitty-gritty points, we've created this course and curated in a compassionate way as we can, because we all know when we're teaching about really difficult topics, we need to also privilege Indigenous resistance, Indigenous survivance, Indigenous pre-contact ways of being in the systems that have been in place. And so these are sort of the things that have grounded it. But mostly what we wanted to do is we wanted to tell the story of, let's see if I can't get my mouse in the right place. There we go. There's our tech support. Have I moved my mouse? Advance to the next screen. It's not advancing. There we go. End of slideshow. Went too fast. Okay, go back here. There's our big slideshow. So really what we wanted to do is we wanted to talk a lot about, and we talk a lot in the article about the process and not just a product, as an Indigenous way of doing something. Process is as important as the product. And the process that we're really, really centering is relationality. And so for us, Evelyn's like, no, look, we're on the land. In the center picture where you can see land and there's the Ghost River behind us and the Rocky Mountains. There's a dog because there's a retreat center that we often go to write. And we go to together and spend, and actually that was a picture from when we wrote most of this article was on the land together and really just being together. On the right-hand side, it's the first day that first time we taught the course last February. Last September, last fall, that was the F in my word, in my head. And then the last course, last time we taught it, all 3 of us together, every single class was April 10th of this year. And then we threw in a picture because we did spend some time in Singapore together last October at a conference there on nursing education conference. All of this to say that, sometimes I think when people are trying to understand how do you do this work and how do you do it in a good way? And so we wanted, and we tell the story in our article of the long-standing relationships, how we actually met one another, how Evelyn and I met, and we're privileging these ways of knowing and ways of becoming kin so that you can actually enter into these processes of creating curriculum, the trust it takes for someone like Evelyn after a decade of working together and co-teaching and creating curriculum, to move from one institution to another with me as we continue to do this good work and get to work with Heather. And then we each bring unique voices. For me, it's a lot about reclamation. It's a lot about learning my language, going home. With my doctorate, I'm not a nurse, but I'm an educator. I have a doctorate of education. And then Evelyn Goodstriker was one of my wisdom guides in my doctorate. And so really just the ways in which we're privileging even the process of how we do things, the deep relational and making kin is how we do this. And through those processes, we recognize for sustainability purposes, we recognize that it takes a lot of financial impact on our faculty to be able to say, look, we need to actually have Evelyn in every class. No, she's not co-teaching. She's not going to be a faculty member, but she's an elder validating this course. And so a lot of teaching, as we know, we often have to do around what it means to build a curriculum in an Indigenous way of doing, and also, validating. I think I really believe we're the first course at the University of Calgary who's done something like this. And so really just trying to trying to forefront these things, trying to make it visible within the academy and within these ways of knowing what it takes to build such a what we're hoping for is a transformational course. And I'm going to pass it over to Evelyn now because she's gonna say really smart things. No pressure, Evelyn.
Thank you for having me. My name is Evelyn Goodstriker. Tawachi Washtewi Imakiapi. Ima Damakota Nakola Makota. I'm so happy to be here and to work with these lovely ladies. We've had we put in a lot of time putting this course together. And one of the things I want to talk about is why we did it. Why are we doing this? And so in the beginning, well, of course, we have good support from this university to do this, to develop this course. And we asked in the development, we thought we would talk to elders in this traditional territory of Treaty 7, and we will talk to nurses, Indigenous nurses. So we did. We got them all together, and they were all pretty much saying the same thing, that when our people go to the hospitals or to any health facility that they go to for help, they are mistreated. And there is racism, huge racism. So we decided to build this curriculum to help the nurses understand our people, where we're coming from, understand our history, understand our land, understand our way of thinking, our way of doing things, and that they are different. And that when our people go to the hospitals, that the nurses would be able to see them as individuals, as from our respective nation. We had talked to Blackfoot people, Sutana people, Nakota people who are nearby, and we've had their input and their perspectives, and it's all been helpful. But the bottom line is one of the nurses said that many of the nurses, in fact, all of them said they never received any Indigenous content in their training, 4 years of training. And they never talk, or, they very little, an hour, maybe 2 hours. That was all they got. So we wanted to make sure this course was, included everything that nurses needed to know. And that's what that was the response we got from our nurses. And one of our nurses that we interviewed said, Bonnie Healy, she said, we want the healthcare and the hospitals to stop harming our people. Mm-hmm. So we that was always echoing in our mind when we put the curriculum together. And we also talk about our values, our Indigenous values, our Indigenous ways of knowing, our Indigenous ways of healing. And so, of course, it's on the land, with the land, the environment, our cosmos. All of those stories are interconnect with our well-being. So when we teach, it's not only about curriculum how we see other curriculum, other courses that how they have to memorize and write a test and ace it. It was more about the emotion, more about the heart, more about empathy, more about treating us like human beings, treating our people as we should be treated. And so that has been our whole intention, and our whole it's in our curriculum in every class. And I'm also happy to say that to date we've had 350 students the first year, and this semester 200 students. So that's 550 students we've had come through our classes. But and we also learned that some of the students are not in nursing. They sneak into our class and say, we want to take this class because we heard about it and we want to learn more. And all of our classes, we always get feedback, and many of our students say this is the beginning of their learning. They want to learn more about Indigenous people. And so we are, that is our good feedback that helps us to do the best we can do to teach them and to have them have a good grounding of our people when they go out to work as nurses and to help our people heal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and thank you. It's always so fun for me to see all these people that I've only ever seen through email before. It's Christmas. Now, our next presenter, Creative Nursing is a themed journal and has been for decades, but we also have articles that are submitted that don't necessarily fit an individual theme and are published when they're ready for prime time. And then we include them in an issue that comes along that it fits. This article is in that category. It's by Julie Larson, and it's about the perception of real nurses in air quotes. What is a real nurse? And so Julie submitted this article outside of the stream of our Indigenous health theme issue, but it just fits so well. So I would like her to I'd like to invite her to tell us about what makes a real nurse.
Thanks, Marty. Thanks for setting me up, because I was sitting here thinking like, oh my gosh, my content is my article is so different, but I hope that I buy some street cred with you all by telling you that my dissertation is nurse educators' understanding of social justice and the relevance to pre-licensure education. So like social justice, and I feel like I'm in I'm with like-minded people. So hopefully you'll accept me despite my topic being kind of over here. This was a deeply personal piece of writing for me. Thank you for publishing it. This is my first and only publication, hopefully more to come. So I really it's been great working with you all. So kind of like thinking about my own journey through the nursing profession over the last 18 years. I started out as a hospital nurse. I left that job, became a clinical nurse, and now I spend all my days full-time teaching undergraduate nursing students at Thomas Jefferson University. And each time I've kind of stepped away from the bedside, stepped further and further away from direct hands-on patient care, I've thought, at every step of that, like I'm less and less a real nurse. And I have found through many conversations with many colleagues, people who have left the bedside to pursue positions in, research, education, anything other than the hospital, that they kind of grapple with this same existential crisis. We all kind of have this preconceived notion of what it means to be a real nurse. And when we leave the hospital, we kind of don't know what to do with ourselves. We start questioning that. I hear colleagues that I teach with who have been nurses for 50 years say, oh, I'm not a real nurse anymore. I just teach, or I just do research, or and I have started to think that there's like some pretty serious implications for professional identity and, thinking about the future of nursing. I'd like to think that we're moving away from the hospitals and back into communities and preventative care and primary care. And so if nurses feel like, leaving the hospital is in some ways like a step down, or that they're not real nurses anymore, how are we gonna, we need nurses working in the community. We need nurses in research. We need to keep that pipeline of education going. So we need nurses to become educators. So I think that so when we use this term real nurse, which is kind of like a derogatory term that I hear thrown around all the time, there's implications for that. Even my own family says to me, oh, Julie's not a real nurse anymore. She teaches now. So there's implications for that. So, I wrote this originally as a concept analysis for one of my doctoral courses. And then it took on a life of its own. People read it and I presented it and they're like, this is really interesting. I've thought of this too. I've had conversations with my colleagues. So basically I'm looking at real nurse from a bunch of different perspectives. I'm looking at it historically. I'm looking at it from the view of the public, from the view of nurses themselves, from the view of nursing students, from the view of other healthcare professionals to try to get this like well-rounded view of like, what do we exactly mean when we say that and where does that come from? It was an interesting investigation. I spent a lot of time talking to people. I read a lot of editorials, a lot of blogs, popular media. You know, what I can tell you is that the public doesn't have a great understanding of what nurses do. The work of nursing is very much hidden, and there's a lot of misunderstandings there. I can tell you that nursing students very much, the ones that I talk to, and this is kind of research-based, there's research that backs this up, that nursing students in fact view hospital nursing as kind of the gold standard, the best, you know, the most exciting, the best form of nursing. And that's concerning to me for, you know, because I want students to consider going into other areas than the hospital. I think the pandemic had a big impact on how we view nurses and what we consider real nurses. You know, our views from the pandemic of nurses were, you know, nurses wearing N95s and working on the front lines, and they were all hospital based. And, you know, all those nurses deserve all the credit, but there were other nurses doing other things too. So it was really interesting. I think what we need to think about more is real nurse from like an academic nurse educator perspective. I think we have the potential to influence nursing students in terms of like what they look at as their career paths, and examine our own biases as educators, you know, what we bring to the classroom and what we present as, you know, kind of legitimate or like important forms of nursing versus ones that are like on the periphery, and how that impacts students' views of nursing. So it was an interesting, you know, investigation to engage in. I still can't tell you exactly what I think a real nurse. I mean, I think a real nurse is a compassionate educator who works in any setting and is a good human with a justice framework, I'd like to think. So that's kind of the definition I arrived at. But thanks so much for letting me present. This was cool.
Julie, now you're making me have an existential crisis in my mind, because I haven't done floor nursing in 30 years probably. So what kind of nurse am I?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And yes, I agree. This is a great journal to publish, and Marty makes it very user friendly. Next up, I would like to present one of the School of Nursing's Doctor of Nursing Practice Health Innovation Leadership students, Mary Rattler Ladisser, to present on her artwork submitted called The Wolf's Trail. And Steve, if you could bring that up to the screen.
Okay. Not my face, better. Oh, okay. Okay. Practicing public speaking, and so I have this thing of like, you have to put your butterflies information. So I don't know if you see them, they're information. Okay, nagsokoas. Nestu ni taniku kitakiraki. Scapi Bacani. My name is Mary Rattler Ladisser. I am, hello relatives. My name is Mary Rattler Ladisser. I come from the Southern Began band of Blackfeet. My mother is also Turtle Mountain Chippewa, and also French and Scottish descent. And I'm a student here at the University of Minnesota. A little about a piece that I wrote. It's actually was a journal entry. I do a lot of journaling, and so it was just kind of like a feeling, like a thought, and then kind of went back to that piece. But I think before I begin to talk about it, I think it's important to discuss how Blackfeet view the world. They view the world in three different dimensions: the above world, the below world, and the water world. And it's believed that these three dimensions are parallel. They're existing side by side, but yet separate. And so with the earth, the water, and the sky reside a great variety of natural and supernatural beings. And it's hard to explain. I even have a tough time explaining this to my children. There's a supernatural element that is a part of our reality. You know, I remember stories of my grandmother and how she would explain things
to me in that lens. And for example, something even as small as closing the curtains as soon as the sun sets, because the spirits of the supernatural are nosy. They like to watch us. And she didn't say it in something that was fearful. She would explain it as more of a matter of fact nuisance or an annoyance. You know, we got to close the windows now. These guys are going to look at us. This past summer, I went back home for ceremony, and I had conversations with my dad, and I need to put on that three-dimensional thinking cap so I can understand these lessons that he's trying to teach me. It's a little militant, so I have to get that lens on pretty quick. It is that belief of interconnectedness, the constant motion, the supernatural beings that exist among us, and seeing reality as a dynamic living system. So I think it's important to understand that context before I explain what I wrote about. So what I wrote about is called the Wolf Trail, and this refers to the Milky Way, which is a celestial path in Blackfeet tradition that spirits traveled after death. This story mentions how wolves are revered for teaching humans how to live in harmony and balance. This Blackfeet tale emphasizes the interconnectedness between nature and the universe, and one of those supernatural beings, which in this case is this ancient wolf. I then move on into the story of weaving together indigenous wisdom and modern quantum concepts. And when I discuss non-determinism and interconnectedness, I'm trying to argue that indigenous thinking was always present and explaining that this is parallel with these emerging scientific views. I'm discussing that positive deviance is integrated with quantum ideas of potentiality, suggesting that unconventional choices can produce positive, transformative change. And I'm also referencing to DNA. I'm referencing stars from the above world, and that ancestral memory connects indigenous beliefs about cyclical renewal to personal and collective transformation. And these together are a recipe for a paradigm shift in healthcare, and that more indigenous, circular, and holistic thinking should be considered to address current imbalances and new approaches to health and environmental challenges. And then this is, in the picture is, these are my family's lodges. And this is just this last summer, I had the honor of the lodge on the right. There's a beaver. You can't tell, but that was transferred to me this summer. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, there's my story.
Thank you so much, Mary, and it's wonderful to finally
I
meet you
know.
in person.
Thank you so much.
This is just a large charge to meet people in person. We are a scholarly journal, and research plays a part in scholarly writing. And our task in this issue is to reconcile scholarly rigor with Indigenous ways of knowing. Our editor-in-chief of this journal is Ashem Yunus, even though the name there says Marty Lewis Hunster because he's using my link, but that's actually Ashem right there. And he's going to present the article that he and our another editorial board member, Shazad Anaya, who's from the University of Calgary, by the way, her Dutch graduate, wrote about a particular methodology that fits Indigenous ways of knowing so well. And then example of an article that we published in this issue that is a good example of this methodology.
Hi. Oh, so thank you, Marty. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I'm slightly late. It's 9 p.m. in Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm based in Newfoundland and Labrador in Canada. I'm an assistant professor at the Faculty of Nursing. Even though Marty said that narrative inquiry somewhat fits with Indigenous methodology, I probably wouldn't say that because I think Indigenous ways of knowing and research methodologies are completely different altogether. Perhaps maybe storytelling is somewhat close to Indigenous narrative inquiry, but still storytelling has its own really well-developed approach of like how it's done in Indigenous research. And I'm not well versed with Indigenous methodologies, still learning about it, working with other scholars. So hopefully I'll probably explain briefly how a narrative inquiry is done. And again, our editorial does not really fit the issue, even though nursing, creative nursing is an issue-focused journal. So unfortunately, we still need to publish some articles which do not fit our overarching theme or the theme of that specific issue. So I'll just go straight into the article briefly. So in this article, we're just talking, it's called Choosing an Analytical Approach in Narrative Inquiry. So we started a series of articles or editorials focused on qualitative data analysis approaches. Previous article, we talked about case study, how to choose data analysis approach or methods in case study. We talked about phenomenology. We talked about ethnography, and then we're going to be talking about qualitative descriptive design. And this one is about narrative inquiry. So we were drawing from the work of Riesman and Brunner, and we're just talking about how people should choose different ways of analyzing data within narrative inquiry. So in generally, narrative inquiry is just called understanding people's accounts and their their experiences and life stories. So we've given a decision tree or an analysis choice tree for people to identify which method would fit. And we've made it clear that this is just based on our opinion. And of course, there's other ways of doing research as well. But this is just how we interpreted narrative inquiry and how it could be applied when you're trying to choose a method that really fits your need. So we talked about 4 different types of methods. We've talked about thematic narrative analysis, which is more along the line of when it emphasizes the theoretical meanings of narratives. Prior theory or theories can serve as a source for interpretation in this type of analysis. Then we talked about structural narrative analysis, which is complete thematic analysis, but it also made explicit the underlying meaning of communicative acts. And then dialogical and performative type of analysis, which talks about creating stories, but explaining them within the sociocultural context as social artifacts. And then visual narrative analysis, which includes stories of an image, but how it is produced and how it is read and understood. So our intention with this type of articles is like giving people a really easy guide to summarize all the literature that's out there, just to give them an idea how they can choose most appropriate method that really fits their overall research project. So I mean, like, I'm not going to go into a lot more detail of this article probably because it still, as I said, it does not really fit with the overarching theme, but just wanted to present it. So thank you again, Marty, for the opportunity.
Are you also going to talk about Cyrus's article, or should I just mention it?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to mention, but I can briefly talk about that too.
Okay.
So the next article, sorry, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is an article that's in the journal that is an example of the kind of I just wanted to say, my favorite line from your article is, narrative inquiry is well suited to and is often used in research about Indigenous people because of its alignment with the fundamental aspects of Indigenous worldviews and knowledge systems, particularly the central role of storytelling. That's what you said.
I did put that in because people have published about it, but I still think, like, even though this was based on others' work, my more in-depth study of like storytelling, I think there's ways of doing it in a different way. So I would still say it's somewhat aligned, not necessarily fully aligned with that approach.
Well, the article that he's
and people can correct me. There's a lot of Indigenous scholars there, and I would probably leave it to them for to decide, and they can probably correct us.
When we're done, I have one fact. I will do this now, but while we're talking about methodology, focus groups. I was in grad school in the 1980s when focus groups were the thing, and they are just this wonderful way. You get the universe of ideas in focus groups. That's what I learned in grad school. Not so much. In several of the articles in this issue, talking circles were used, which are every bit as rigorous, every bit as rich in data as focus groups, except the fact in the past that they were called talking circles. I think that kind of data was marginalized. And that's one of the things we've done in this issue is say, no, talking circles are a great way to hear voices that haven't been heard before. So
yeah, and I think perhaps narrative inquiry could be somewhat based on storytelling. It wasn't recognized that way. And now that it's used as such, and people have started to recognize that there are Indigenous ways of research as well, then we're kind of trying to align storytelling with narrative inquiry.
So shall I mention Cyrus's article? I can just tell what is in the
yeah, for sure.
Annotated table of contents. So this is an article that, again, kind of like Julie's, was in our queue and then just worked out really well in this issue because it's such a good example of narrative inquiry. And it's about nurses advanced practice nurses and their take on the use of AI. And this is from the Philippines. The title is Looking into the Future of ChatGPT and its Cultural Considerations from Filipino Nurse Scientist Perspectives, a narrative-focused group discussion. So instead of just surveying these nurses, they discussed with them to get richer data about how is AI actually informing your practice now? Where do you see it going? AI is artificial intelligence is very much a hot button item. And so these nurses were able to express through this narrative inquiry on the ground how it's actually working for them now and how they foresee it working into the future, what things need to be guarded against, ethical considerations. For instance, there are a ton of ethical problems that go along with this very useful tool. Is there anything else you can think of to summarize this article? Or
Yeah, I think there were a couple of things that I really liked about the article. Was like they used a lot of like Tagalog. They incorporated Tagalog language, and then they tried to highlight that how ChatGPT or other language models or AI type softwares, they need to take into account also the local healthcare practices or how traditional medicine or traditional healthcare approaches or local languages are somewhat like the highlighting the cultural dimensions of tailoring AI tools. That was like probably a really neat insight for me, because I mean, like we do talk about it when you look at language models like ChatGPT or other language models. I think they are really tailored to Western culture a lot. And then like people who are using those models in other countries, even if they use it for like productive use, it does not really give you similar type of insights because these are not trained on other different languages. They are only trained based on English or probably a couple of other well-known languages, perhaps German, French, or other Western language.
that was a really important, and that's an item that may not have come out in other kinds of methodology about this. So, well, thanks. I told you what my favorite line from your article is. So I would like to remind everyone that the addresses of the corresponding authors are in the chat. And Steve, I did put it in the chat for the presenters, but I hope you're able to put it in the chat now for everybody who's been attending this webinar. When the recording of this event is ready for prime time, it'll be posted on our website. And also remember that if your library doesn't already have a subscription, there's a link on our website. I'm just saying. So now in the time remaining, we have 15 minutes more, and Teddy and Misty are going to moderate a discussion about the articles that have been presented and about the theme of this issue.
Do we have any questions come in online?
I haven't seen any in our chat. But do you have?
No open questions. Okay.
No open questions. Okay. Do you have one?
Any questions from any students in the audience for any of the presenters? I'll let you think about it. I have one for Michelle, Heather, and Evelyn. I'm wondering if you have given advice to other institutions on how to develop a course there. This is something that I've been talking with our administration about, is creating a course related to just Indigenous health, Indigenous content. So look for guidance on if you've shared your wisdom, your practices, how to get one going elsewhere.
Yeah, not yet. I mean, the article I think is sort of the first step in getting it out there. And so we're excited about that. I'm trying to think, are we presenting on this? I don't know. We have quite a few.
Or ISOTL.
ISOTL? I don't know. We have some conferences coming up that we'll be chatting about this. But do you have an idea?
Well, this course is within a curriculum which is within a larger kind of work within our faculty. We have a rural and Indigenous community route in our faculty. And so we provide a lot of counsel to other programs across Canada in particular and actually a bit into the United States, about increasing the number of Indigenous students and supporting Indigenous students and working with community. So particularly that way. But I think it's been in more informal ways. I think one thing that's been really neat with our kind of relationship is having the different first voices, like having an elder in every classroom. And as we speak with other kind of programs or other faculty from other faculties within our institution about, making sure that you have the resources to support that. For both Michelle and I, we taught when we were not actually workloaded for this. And so then the amount of actually
Labor.
that we put into this course in our hearts. The other one is having a non-Indigenous person. I'm a settler of Scottish and German heritage, and the importance of opening up what it means to transform and heal as a non-Indigenous person who comes from a settler heritage. And we have many students who are newcomer students. And so to open them up to what does it mean to situate yourself well as a visitor on this land? And what does it mean to heal our relationship from our different positions? And so we speak a lot to other faculty members, to other faculties and other institutions about that necessary healing. And so often, Indigenous peoples might be problematized because we see statistics when the problem isn't Indigenous people or Indigenous ways of knowing, it's colonization. And we've all been impacted by colonization. So how do we heal that? How do we center Indigenous voices? And I think those are the conversations that we have. And I think the course is a great way for us to be able to kind of demonstrate an example of what that could look like.
And we'll come visit if you want, Miss.
Yes, we will.
Awesome.
Kind
Awesome.
of see if nothing else.
Thank you. Dr. Best, go ahead.
Oh, hey, Misty. I was just going to add to that conversation. In Australia, we've had mandated Indigenous curriculum being taught in schools of nursing since 2012. So we've been doing it for a really long time, but it actually came through our regulatory authorities. So it's now part of mandated curriculum. We have to teach Indigenous health. And in a number of schools, we have been teaching Indigenous health to undergraduate nursing programs as early as 2003. So we do have a body of work here in Australia about the writing of Indigenous health curriculum, how it's rolled out, when it's rolled out, why it's rolled out, and all that type of stuff. So I'm more than happy to pass on that information if anyone's interested.
Yes, very interested. Obviously, the United States is many decades behind everyone else. Sandra.
Yes, probably just following on from that, and I'll just say, excuse me, please, my voice keeps cutting out. I've got a horrible cold at the moment. In New Zealand, we've also, obviously, with the regulatory requirements around Māori health and cultural safety, we've also had the embedding of Māori health knowledge, Indigenous health practices, colonisation, and so forth. But just to raise awareness, I guess, that just because we've got it embedded in our programs and our curricula doesn't always mean it works all that well or effectively. We've also faced the issues of who teaches this. And you've talked about having elders in the classroom and recognising that that's a huge burden on the Indigenous population as well, to expect them to be able to be there, be present, and to deal with the implications of taking that on. And certainly for Māori in New Zealand, it went through a real phase of a lot of backlash when it was first introduced, around, why are nurses needing to learn this? Why is this part of healthcare? We've moved past that, I think, now, thank goodness. But at one point there were issues around, nurses failing nursing because they failed cultural safety, and nonsense like this, without recognising what it is that was being taught. But also that whole sense of, if you happen to identify as Māori and you were a faculty member, there was an expectation that you would want to be teaching Māori health, Māori Indigenous health, and also issues around colonisation. And not everyone wants to do that or feels safe doing that. And there's still, even now, there's at times issues in the classroom around the idea of who is colonised and who are the colonisers, and that historical hurt, and how you actually manage that. And it can be quite contentious. So I guess I'm saying that it's great to embed it in the program, and it's necessary, but it's not always the sole answer. And I don't know that any of us have the answers. And in New Zealand, we have cultural safety, which is the Pākehā or the non-Indigenous understandings, and we have kawa whakaruruhau, which is the Māori understanding of colonisation. And the two programs together are trying to address some of these issues. But even with that, we are facing increasing problems. And this, I think, is a global thing that, and I may be making an assumption here, but I've certainly become increasingly aware of a backlash around liberal thinking, around equity, around Indigenous rights that we are seeing everywhere. And that is making it increasingly difficult. In New Zealand, we feel that the treaty is not perfect. It's certainly not always upheld, but we've felt that it made a difference. We're now seeing government actions and movements that are maybe undermining that, and that sense of belonging that we've tried to address through the treaty. And certainly in other countries, we see through the media that there are issues that are similar. So I don't know. I'm just putting it out there to be aware of and to be mindful of. Yeah.
Just on a positive note, I work at Ara Institute of Canterbury, Christchurch, New Zealand, and we are poised to deliver a new Bachelor of Nursing program called Tuaho, and it's a sister curriculum to a Bachelor of Māori, Puawānanga, in Northland of New Zealand. So our curriculum is not indigenised, but it has increased Indigenous knowledge in it. And the focus is we're utilising information that's available on the public domain. So, literature. But of course, we are engaging with mana whenua, which means the people of the land in our area, Ototahi, which is Christchurch and Canterbury, and actually the South Island is Ngāi So we will have mana whenua teaching in some aspects of the program. So it's pretty exciting, actually, what we're embarking on.
Yeah, I can't raise my hand. I don't know what's going on. But just to add to the conversation, at Memorial University, we do have a mandatory course. It was developed in 2022. It's Indigenous Health, Healing, and Wellness. And I think it's we usually teach that across the university or in all disciplines, like sociology would take it, social work would take it, nurses would take it as well. And then our Indigenous communities mainly are Inuit and Mi'kmaq community in Newfoundland and Labrador. So it's based on like their healing practices and whatever our traditional medicine that they've been using. But it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't even take it, even though it's mandatory. But it's still growing. Hopefully, we're hoping that in the next couple of years, probably a lot of people would actually register for the course. We do incorporate a lot of component of this specific course into our teaching, like in first year, second year, and third year, and fourth year. So it's integrated throughout the curriculum.
I guess we're fortunate in one sense in that we have a single Indigenous population. I know that in Australia, for example, there are so many different groups, languages, cultures within the Indigenous population. and I imagine it's the same in Canada and in the United States. And to address all of those meaningfully and respectfully would be more difficult. Within Aotearoa, we incorporate cultural safety as we've indicated, it's a requirement now to meet our nursing competencies, but it's also a requirement within medical practice. Within most of the health professions, it's a regulatory requirement. So it's just kind of accepted. And under Te Tiriti, it's a government requirement that it's part of all the legislative processes. So that's why I say, although it's not always been upheld, at least it's a framework that we can work within. And that kind of sets it aside from most countries. In fact, I don't think there's any other country that has something similar. So while it's not ideal and that it's not been upheld perfectly by any means, it is at least a framework. Yeah.
To be honest, Sandra, when we talk about, like, when I work with Indigenous scholars here at Memorial, it's like New Zealand and Australia are seen as examples of the countries where Indigenous methodology or Indigenous work has really taken shape, and people are really incorporated that into their everyday lives. Like, we were doing a lot of reviews currently, and like most of the literature that we're getting is actually from New Zealand and Australia. So we do, I mean, Canada is trying their best to get to the same level like New Zealand and Australia is doing. But unfortunately, I think it's going to take a long time to actually get to the same level.
I did have one question I wanted to ask. I was actually going to ask Kristen, but obviously she's not been able to remain. But I thought Tuila might be able to answer this one. And that was about, I think Kristen made a comment, something along the lines of there being only 0.3% of the nursing population being Native American. And I thought with the group that you're working with, you might have some idea as to how many that represents in terms of the overall nursing population compared to the number within the American population per se. Because I was thinking within New Zealand, we're concerned that we don't have enough Indigenous nurses. And I was just doing a quick check, and we've got, I think, 7.4% Māori nurses, but we've got something like 16% of our population are Māori. So we know that we're still nowhere near where we need to be. And same with Pacific peoples, because that's also a large part of our population. And I think we've only got 4% Pacific peoples in our nursing population. But was that 0.3, was that actually an accurate, or did I mishear on that? Do you know, Tuila? And what are the steps that are being done towards increasing the number of Indigenous nurses?
Yeah, I think from the most recent survey that was done on registered nurses, of course, that's like who received the survey responded, that the population, American Indian Alaska Natives make up 0.4% of the population in the US. And then, like, I think what's also alarming is like when you get to graduate level, like programs for Indigenous nursing students, like there's even less representation. And in my paper, I highlighted those stats in my discussion of it, but also like there's not a lot known about how many like even like faculty are American Indian Alaska Native in the nursing program. I think if you even look at just to like share like other numbers, our university, we have about 16,000, 17,000 students, and the second largest like group is American Indian Alaska Natives, or American Indians, like Montana tribal members, making up like 6.5% of Montana's population. And I think this is the first semester I've been at the university where our American Indian Alaska Native enrollment matches the same population statistics of the state. So, and there's been a lot of work, and that to put that in context, it's 850-ish like Native American students. So just and like you look at the journey for students, it's across the board. It's a systems, like it's challenging to leave community, to leave home, to leave place-based knowledges, and to uh, travel across the state to, or travel across the country to go to a school that it's not indigenized, or like, I think we're lucky at Montana State, like we have American Indian Hall, we have a lot of efforts from the university doing indigenous and like cultural programming. But like one of my challenges, just being somebody like watches systems, we don't have like, I feel like it's harder to push that um the indigenous like indigenizing the curriculum and healthcare into these westernized healthcare systems. Just because it doesn't match this like the accreditation standards. Actually, it's something I'm curious about, so I'm happy to like hear all the conversations about it. And cultural safety, it is different than here. When I was in Aotearoa, we went to the nursing program there, and I got to hear cultural safety from a Maori person. And one of my criticisms or skepticisms was like in the literature, I didn't really hear from the Maori people how they thought about cultural safety. So I don't know. It
And I
was
think that's a key thing, is that we don't, because we can't ask the recipients of care what they think about it, because as soon as you ask someone as the nurse or as the provider, you're in a position of power over them. So it's really hard to collect that sort of data. So how do we generate people to feed back to us in a meaningful way? And that's been the bugbear for it, I think, from its inception, is like, how do we know? Because as soon as you try and measure it or ask, or it's got to be spontaneous, it's sort of got to be like, and it's really hard. And that's something we're still struggling with here, I think, is how do you know that you're actually making a difference? You can say, well, I'm trying to do this and I think I'm acting in a way that is, but that's why self-reflection is so much part of it as well, and trying to get other people to question you and ask you, have you thought about this? Or, because we don't know, and we can't send out a survey or ask our patients at the end of the shift, oh, was I culturally safe? Well, duh, like they're really going to tell you that you weren't, because there's that fear that if people say something negative, that you'll treat them differently, that you won't look after them. And we know even now that people are reluctant often to disclose ethnicity because they think they'll be treated differently. Even in New Zealand, it's certainly by no means a safe environment, and people will still at times choose not to present for care or for follow-up. So it's tricky, yeah.
Just by the way, Hickey Barton here in Aotearoa has just completed a PhD around the numbers of Māori registered nurses that we are producing, which has remained stagnant for about many years, actually. And she has some very interesting recommendations. So if anyone's interested, I can send you the link for her thesis. So just please let me know.
All right. I think we are at our time. So I just want to thank all of our authors for their incredible work and for sharing your scholarship with us. I would encourage you to reach out to your colleagues and encourage them to submit future publications to Creative Nursing. And again, I want to thank Marty and Teddy for their shared partnership in getting this issue published. Anything else?
Just thank you everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you all. Take care.
Thanks
Thank you
for the
for hosting.
opportunity.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.